All right, so it is Thursday, September 2nd, but when we stream this, I have no idea what date it's going to be yet because I haven't planned that yet because I am getting ready for my baby number 6 coming. So we'll see what happens here, but thanks everybody for watching whenever you're watching. I'll probably be watching this live replay as well. So this is another episode of Learning Tech Talks where we are continually exploring the landscape of learning technology while cutting through the fluff and getting the questions answered you need answered. I'm joined by another HR tech guru. I've got Juan Betancourt, right? Did I say I forgot to ask exactly how to pronounce it, but I think I got it right.
Perfect. You got it. Nailed it.
Look at that. Nailed it. I am off to a great start today. So, and he's joining me. He's from Humantelligence, and we're going to be talking about analytics, culture. We're going to be talking about all sorts of super fun stuff. So I'm looking forward to the conversation, seeing where it goes. And we're also going to show what the possibilities are because I love using the word reimagining. And Juan, you're reimagining some things as it relates to assessments, health, culture, all this stuff. So we're going to get into that. But before we do, we got to do some icebreaker activities because I always like to do that. It helps me get to know you better, helps other people get to know you. So let's start with an easy one. Here's a slow pitch. Where are you in the world today? So where are you located? You're at home, if I remember right. Yes?
Yeah. So I'm in home. My home is in the suburbs of Miami metro area in a neighborhood called Coral Gables.
Okay. You know what? I think you're close to the ChenMed home office, actually. The name sounds familiar. So I'm up in Milwaukee, but that area sounds very, very, very familiar to conversations I have on a regular basis. So I haven't been there, but I have heard of it. All right. So you're down.
By. We'll have dinner next time you come with your 6 kids.
Hey, you know what? There you go. Maybe we'll swing by. We'll come hang out and we'll see you next time I'm down there. So that's where you are. I'm in Waukesha, Wisconsin, joined by my friendly houseplant, Fred, like I always am. Now let's go to question number 2. You've had a little bit of time to think about this. So I'm curious, and I got to hear the story behind this, but what was your favorite class in high school?
So it's funny, while I was in high school, it was AP European history because we would go to Europe every summer with my father who taught at business school called INSEAD in France. And so I wanted to understand Europe a lot better. But there was a course I hated. Every year. He went there for 15 summers. We went to Fontainebleau, France. However, ironically, my favorite class retroactively now 35, 40 years out is typing. I hated typing in high school, but it has become the key to my success. I can type as fast as people speak. And when I was a partner at Heidrick and Struggles and Korn Ferry, I was the first person ever to be able to have transcripts of my interviews of executives. And it gave me a competitive advantage against anybody else. And even now running Humantelligence, my company, I have transcripts after every meeting of the meetings, who said what. And so my ability to be productive is like tenfold. And a class, I was valedictorian and the only class I got a B in was typing. And I hated that I got a B in one course and didn't say I only got A's for 4 years. But looking back, it's the class that made me the most successful executive ever, more important than going to Harvard and going to Wharton Business School.
I love the story behind that, by the way, right? The story to me is fantastic. So mine's actually, I like mine for a very similar reason to yours, although different. So I had a public speaking class with a professor who was Mr. Hellwig.
Great name.
He was brutal. Like
his name sounds brutal.
But he was brutal. He was former military.
Oh
he would tear apart anything you wrote. So, he taught you everything about writing, how to write, the structure, what's good, what's bad. He would just be brutal. And when you gave public speaking things, if he didn't like where you were going, he'd say, get in the corner. And you would have to stop your speech and go stand in the corner because he was just, and so similar, it drove me nuts because it just, in high school, you're a kid and you're like, this is so stupid. Like, why am I being, but looking back, I'm like, that pressure, the push, the drive, the just criticism, but it was positive. He was very positive. It's just like he wanted what was best and he just pushed you. And as you got better, he just pushed you harder. which just made you more frustrated as a kid because you're like, just leave me. It's good enough, but nothing was ever good enough for him. So there you go. Completely different angles. But here you go saying, here those things in high school have had dramatic impacts on, I still think back to that class has had a big impact on my career, even though
my public high school had more impact on my career than two of the best universities in the world. Isn't that amazing? One course.
That is crazy. That is crazy. I still am trying to picture you transcribing literally everything. I'm a pretty quick typist, but
and people don't even see it. They don't even know I'm doing it. I don't have to look at the keyboard. People say it's a freak of nature. Like, it really is strange, but whatever.
All right. Well, we'll flip the camera at some point, and we'll see if you can. We'll do a race test or something like that. So anyway, so let's transition the conversation a little bit and start by getting to know a little bit more about you, Juan, because obviously now we know you're an amazing typist, but also you've got a seasoned background in things. What ended up I guess just tell me your background. Obviously you had a prestigious pedigree from a school standpoint, but did you know that where you are today is where you wanted to go?
No clue. I'm one of the late bloomers, right? I figured out what I wanted to do in life at about 40. So there were 20 years after high school where I was just kind of call it a zigzag career, where I was just bouncing around from industry to industry, job function to job function, not knowing. And it was frustrating, right? Because a lot of my peers from Harvard, they knew what they wanted to do at like 16. And so, they were making good money and like had titles like VP, like by the time they're 30 years old. So, my best school overall for management probably was Procter & Gamble, the big company that owns Tide, and it's one of the 5 biggest consumer products companies. Pretty much everything. There's a study that shows 99% of every house has at least 5 products in them in their bathroom or in their kitchen.
If you got batteries in your remote, they're probably Procter & Gamble.
So Procter, I did brand management and general management there 3-4 years. Then I went on to work in the sports world, kind of like at Reebok. Then I worked at Puma. My first claim to fame, Puma went bankrupt after 20 years of really fast growth, and they started to license it like a franchise. And they had everything from like microphones to pens to cream called Puma all over the world, and it went bankrupt. And so I was brought in to implement Procter & Gamble within Puma and relaunch the company. And so I was president and chief operating officer and chief marketing officer, basically the number 2 to this running the show, but it was only 300 people out of Germany. Okay. They'd fired 10,000 people. It was bankrupt. And so here I was, old brand, and I was able to relaunch the brand, open the US, hired 500 people for the US, open Brazil, open Germany, just relaunch the company. And it's probably the largest brand turnaround in the world, of an old dead brand. Now it's, doing quite well. Then I went to technology, got lucky. A lot of my career success has been luck. I'm not the one to say I'm so smart. I actually got lucky. I went to join a company that I had no idea what they did. I literally joined them without knowing what it was. It was called Siebel Systems, Siebel. Guy named Tom Siebel founded it. He was number 4 at Oracle, and he launched something called CRM. Nobody knew what that was. I didn't know. It was customer relation management, 1998, and I was employee about 110. 1 year later, we had 12,000 people. This guy hired 1,000 people a month. We went from $16 million in revenue to $3 billion in 2 years of revenue. So no company in history has ever even done half that growth that fast. So Tom Siebel ended up being the 3rd richest man in the world at $65 billion back in 2001. The market crashed, and then it got bought by Oracle. Today, Salesforce kind of took that baton and became Salesforce. But Siebel and Tom Siebel was on the path to be the Salesforce that it is today. Anyways, I was lucky because I just talked to all the top business schools, Harvard, Wharton, Stanford, MIT, Chicago, right? And all the top MBAs were going to this company. I'm like, you know what? Those people are all really smart. I'm just going to go where they're all going. And so I just joined them. So it was luck. And from there, I
follow these intelligent people, and I'm guessing it's probably going to go well for me.
Yeah, I believe the word trust. People in your personal life, you need to trust messages from God and through your loved ones. And in your career, you need to trust people and see patterns. And even though your logical mind says, I'm scared, I don't know what that is, you need to trust. Trust is the portal to success in both personal and professional. And most people live in fear and scarcity. If you live in love and abundance, you trust, and that will lead to the doors opening. And that's the other half of my career success. And then from there, I went to back to Europe to France, and lived in a town called Lille, Lille, up near England and Belgium. And there I worked for the largest sports manufacturer and retailer in the world. They're actually 10 times bigger than Nike, but nobody knows them in the US. Decathlon, like the sporting event of 10 events. They have 30 categories of sports. It started with 10, hence the name, but then they grew to 30, about a $200 billion company. Okay. With over 1,000 stores around the world. I mean, France alone's 1,000. They put everybody out of business. They actually just re-entered the US and California last year. But I worked for them running the north of France, all in French, managing thousands of people in French, and then became the CEO for a small 300 million division. So I ran the US. I was CEO for North America, turned it around for the first time in 10 years, made money, ended up closing it because it wasn't growing fast enough for them. And so that was an amazing experience as a CEO. And then from there, I started kind of a second career, which was a headhunter. I became a partner at Heidrick and Struggles, did those for 6 years, and then ran my own executive search firm for 3 years. Last chapter is
search. So you went from CEO to then executive search.
Yes. And that was a hard transition because my resume was top brands, right? Harvard, Wharton, Procter & Gamble, Reebok, Puma, even Decathlon. It's one of the most well-regarded companies in the world, right? And then when I left that, my parents and all my friends like, Juan, why would you become a recruiter after Harvard and Wharton and being a CEO? Are you okay? And it was hard. I was the only one who thought it was the right for me. And I just believed my true north. And another, I guess, tip here is, even if everyone who loves you is telling you, what are you doing, or questioning it, follow. If it's for your career, now personally, I would follow their advice, but if it's for your career, only you know what's best for you. And even if it's off the beaten path and strange, do it, because that's what your purpose is. And I'm so glad I did, because I was really good at headhunting, and I became the youngest headhunter at Heidrick and Struggles as a partner. I became the top biller at Quantify under 50. And then I started my own search firm and did very, very well. I was actually selected by NBC, the president of the TV network, to be an advisor to Donald Trump. So I was on The Apprentice for 1 season for 4 shows in the boardroom, replacing George, telling Donald Trump who to hire and who to fire. So it was kind of a wild ride. I was kind of like a celebrity headhunter, and I made a lot of money. And with that money, and with a spiritual practice that I began about 7 years ago, call it a meditative journey, where you fast and you meditate for 2 days at a time. When you don't eat food and meditate for 2 days, it becomes hallucinating, I think. But I got the message and the direction to change course and solve one of the largest problems in the future of work, which is, how do people integrate with companies so that the company wins and the employees wins? Okay. How do you implement self-awareness and consciousness, not just through meditation, but in the workplace, so that you have emotional intelligence driving better performance, team level and at the corporate level, so you have a win and win and win, both individual, company, and customers all win, by elevating the vibration and connection through human souls at work. And that is the genesis of a Humantelligence.
Okay, that is the career story in and of itself is fantastic. I mean, there's honestly, while this is technically, you might be like, well, this is learning tech talks. What does this have to do? But there's a lot of things that I think are really important in there as learning professionals that we can take from this. Because I think sometimes when you think about the role learning has in careers for people, we have a lot of opportunity to help encourage the very things you just talked about, of like giving people the confidence to do the things that they know that they should do, but they're just afraid to do it because maybe I don't know how, or maybe this isn't something, can I really do that? That goes against the grain of the traditional career path, says this is my next move, but I don't think that's what I'm supposed to do. And we have the ability to help people understand at the core, what are you really good, or what makes you tick, or how do you grow to be successful? So I think hearing your story actually does tie very closely to learning and development, because there's huge opportunity for us to play in that. And I just love like recruiting. You're
like, what? You're going to be a recruiter?
But I know this is what I want to do. And so I'm going to go all into it, and I'm going to be the best at it, because that's what I want to do. I'm not just going to kind of go, well, I guess I'll go try a thing. And so anyway, love the story behind that. But so, okay. So now you did all this crazy stuff. You've been all these crazy places, all this pedigree. You've been to all these schools. Your high school is still probably your most impactful educational experience. But so all this stuff, and you go, now I'm going to start Humantelligence. And so now you tell people, I started this company, Humantelligence, and they go, what's that? What do you say?
So Humantelligence, today we call it the culture software. And it's a mix of where psychometrics should be, right? Personality tests, right? So self-awareness meets emotional intelligence for the organization, where both company and employees win. So it's using, a tool. We actually have the most advanced psychometric tests in the world, a questionnaire. It's 36 questions. They're different for each person. And in 12 minutes, we measure what we call the BMW framework of self-awareness and emotional intelligence. That is BMW, like the car. It's the best one out there anyway. And in high school, that was my favorite car. So BMW, we measure behaviors, kind of like DISC, predictive index, strength finders, SHL. There's a lot of tools, hundreds, that measure behaviors. We measure motivators, or what Hogan calls values, except that's really expensive and long for most assessment tools. So you can't get that to all employees. And we measure what those two groups don't measure, because those companies were all made for self-awareness. They weren't developed to see how someone gets along with others and what the environment impact on energy is. So we were the first company to measure work environment and what energizes you. So you could actually have two people with the same behaviors, DISC or predictive index, one successful and really happy and engaged in their job in a role at a company, and the other with the same exact results for predictive index or DISC, miserable in the same job at that company. Now, how do you explain that? Because of the environment impact and the culture of the environment. Same with Hogan. You can have two people with the same exact Hogan, one successful and happy and one miserable in the same company, in the same job. And that can be explained by that third variable, work environment. And so it's the most comprehensive tool. In 12 minutes, nobody can do in 1 hour. And we've priced it really low so that we can quote what we call democratize self-awareness. These tools, typically the M and the W, motivators and work styles, is only for rich people and executives. Most, the 90% of hourly wage workers aren't getting those kind of tools, and they're longer.
No.
So we decided, you know what? It's better for everyone to have access to these tools. And that's what's in it for the people, the masses, democratization of self-awareness. But what's in it for the company? Well, the company, now they get to see the entire company psychometrics. And if you roll that up with now data analytics, which has only become to advent, in the last 7 years, you can now get culture mappings, bottom up understanding of team A, team B, team C in a division, call it, say, finance and accounting, right? You have the finance people, accounting people, two different teams in one group called finance and accounting. And that's a certain culture. You also get the culture by rolling up the data for all your marketing people. Oh, and by the way, the culture of your marketing team is very different than the culture of your finance and accounting, and it should be. And then you can roll up the data for your 1,000 employees in sales, and you have a different culture there. Oh, and by the way, what are we trying to highlight there? There is not one culture at a company. And that's why we're called the culture software, because we're the first company to A, accurately measure culture with data, not an engagement survey, not culture. And then B, we're the first company to show companies that you have infinite cultures at your organization. It's one of the reasons why the not one. It's like why the US. Sure, generally there's a trend in the US, being Americans is a certain thing. But if you put a Tennessee person with a inner city Philly person, with a Bostonian, with a Seattle, Asian immigrant who works in tech, with a, Mexican Chicano from LA, all over the map, this country is great because we embrace and
we embrace the diversity of that.
Right? And so same thing with companies that have diversity of culture, meaning diversity of thought, will always
Yep.
outperform others. And so our platform, the culture software, lets you understand your culture, lets you measure it, understand it, and infuse emotional intelligence throughout your organization, leading to better performance, leading to better diversity. And that's what we're doing. And the future of work, every software company in HR, Workday, SuccessFactors, UKG, the three big ones, they're all moving that way. That is the future of work, to make work more human, not just to automate processes.
So I want to dig into this a little bit, because I think there's some really important things you hit on here, which is, and I want to kind of hit on some of the things that might be a little controversial with folks who may be listening to it, because I think about the first piece, which I love. I don't think anybody would argue the democratization side of it. I think people have seen value in assessments, and this is where we'll get into like the assessment piece. But I think people have seen some value in that, but it's always been in a silo or a vacuum or whatever, where you go, well, we only really know this about a certain group of people or a small bit, or the data's kind of scattered throughout the organization, so we really don't even know whether it's there. So the fact that you're now making this available to the rest of the organization does give you that access to visibility you couldn't have before, because it was either too expensive or too onerous to try and do. I mean, I just even think we won't get into all the assessment tools, but someone would be like, oh, we do MBTI, and you're not going to do an MBTI on the entire enterprise. And even if you did, the likelihood that you're going to be able to do anything with that data is minuscule. So there's that. But the part that I'm curious about, you talked about your BMW, which I like that. I even remembered it, because someday I'm going to drive a 7 Series. That's my goal. But the point is that assessment tools, people get really weird when you bring this topic up, and it almost creates a bit of a polarization, because some people I'm a INTJ, or I'm a this, or I'm a, on StrengthsFinder, I'm a this. And it almost becomes their
self-limiting.
Assessment. Well, it does, because they almost place this, I'm this, and now I let that define what I do, instead of saying, no. This is designed to give awareness to things, but then it's not the definement of you. And that's where I see it go wrong. But some people really go big on this. And then I'll see other people go the complete opposite, and they go, they're a joke. They're a waste of time. It doesn't do anything. And I'm like, I'm not on that side either, because they do give you some insights that you go, well, I maybe now better understand your point of self-awareness. I better understand myself now. But if you let that limit you, that's a problem. So I'd love just your take on that, because I do see both sides of this, and both sides I'm like, I think you're off track if you're going on either polar end.
Yes. So you've hit one of the key kind of concerns around assessments. And there's another concern you didn't mention, which I want to also highlight in this kind of like, what are the issues with assessments in the past, which is accuracy. Some of these assessments have never been scientifically validated. So they might not even
somebody made them up somewhere and said,
yes.
You know what, I think this is it.
Yes.
So there's that one, and the other one, and then I'll let you finish. I told you I was just going to jump in.
Yeah. So
I've actually seen these go into, they become bias things, where it's like, you're a that, you're a that.
So the key is, I bought an assessment tool that's been validated every 3 years for 30 years. It's one of the oldest ones in the marketplace. So the key is, first, you got to find one that's scientifically validated. Okay. And so, any industrial psychologist can look at a technical validation of an assessment company, and there's hundreds of assessment companies. Always ask them for the technical validation. If they say they can't send it to you, or they don't have one, run for the mountains, because you're not even sure if the results are going to be what they say they are. Now, even though there are validated tests like Humantelligence's tests and others, and predictive index is validated, Hogan's validated, you still then need to avoid the next big issue, which is, and it's how it's presented within an organization. So there's a little bit of change management, and how the actual tool presents itself. We are a software company that has an assessment. So when we present the results, we actually solve for this problem. We present it as a developmental tool, not as a defining tool. So it's not a conclusion. And the analogy I use is sports and acting. When you do an assessment for a Major League Baseball player coming into the league or a basketball player going into the NBA, you do a battery of tests and you say, okay, well, the basketball player is really good with the right hand. They're like a 95 out of 100. Their left hand's like a 30. They got to work on that. There are 3-point shots, like, they're like a 80 on the 3-point shot from the right, and they're like a 60 on the left. So now you know where you are, and you want to then improve on the other things, because maybe you were good at fast break in college, but now you need to do a different type of slow game in NBA. I don't know the inner workings of NBA.
I'm not a sports guy either, but I get what you're going with it, right? The goal isn't to say you're a this is now what you're limited to, because that's what we've defined you as.
Right. It's now we know where we need to focus energy, resources, time as your manager, as the company, to develop you. And so that's one thing that we presented as. And the second thing we presented as this insight about the person, we then compare it to the team culture or the company culture, because now it's all data. And we say you're only 38% to what the company needs you to be. So let's create a developmental plan to develop your other areas. If you're really decisive and all you do is make quick decisions all the time, this company has a culture of being very deliberate, because a mistake can be very costly. We have really big customers, and we're talking, let's say, General Electric, like, MRI,
right,
products.
Or we've got very high regulations.
High regulation, right, exactly. Like, SEC is going to be on our back, right? And so we will now coach you on that. Conversely, if you don't know that about that person, they come in, they make a mistake, and they get fired. So actually, it's like anything really powerful. If it's used for the right thing, with the right structure, with the right reason, it's transformational, positive way for everybody. And if it's used in the wrong way, which some assessments are, then it's detrimental, not transformational. And so those are some of the things that we address when we work with our clients and individuals. To be at a company as a human being, it's not just relying on who you are and what your strengths are. Companies need to develop your other areas. It's like an actor. The best actors in the world can turn on and off their normal personality traits and turn completely on others. So you had that one guy who was a comedian all his life from Mork for Mork, and then he did Philadelphia, and then he died from cancer. What was the guy's name? Philadelphia with the guy with, it was the most serious. He was a comedian and did something serious, and people said, wow, what a range of roles. He was a comedian all of his life, and now he's doing Philadelphia, which is a very serious movie. But that's the point. The people who are most agile, to throw a very common term now in development of software and in management, the individuals in the corporate world who are most agile and adaptable and can be deliberate in certain moments and decisive in others, who can be helping in others and self-starter in another, the ones who can be data-driven in some moments and creative in others, those people who can develop their other side actually are the most valuable employees as individuals, the most valuable teammates, and the most valuable leaders at every level of an organization. That understanding of self-awareness and then how to be the other so you can connect and collaborate better, which I call emotional intelligence at work, EQ. That is the future of work, where every company is going to want everyone to be able to do that. And so we are the portal for companies to get there.
Well, and what's interesting is you bring this up, piece. If anybody's following the trends of like, okay, hey, skills, what we're talking about, to me, this is that adaptability piece that you're talking about, where you know where your strengths lie, but you know how to flip the switch and shift gears because circumstances have changed, or the environment's changed, or the work has changed dramatically. And you know how to say, this isn't necessarily my comfort zone, but I know what to do with it to be able to adapt. But the problem is, to your point, and I think this is where a lot of L&D and talent professionals struggle, is a lot of times we don't have that visibility into things. So we're counting on a manager to know that about their teams. And a lot of managers don't take the time to actually get to know their people, to go, you know what, Juan's really good right here, but this is something I think and they're not doing it. And even to your point, I think this goes back to something else where there's a limitation, is even some of them that are, it's not a validated any sort of scientific.
It's all intuitive. It's all feeling.
It's all feeling like,
yeah. And by the way, and that challenge, which had existed for the last 30, 40 years, layer on that the new remote and hybrid, where you don't even meet people anymore. How do you connect and collaborate when you've never met someone and can't get that understanding? Enter Humantelligence, where everybody, even if they've never met, can start to understand, connect, and communicate and resonate vibrationally like they've been married for 5 years after 12 minutes.
Like the eHarmony of company culture.
We are eHarmony meets Moneyball for HR.
There's your new marketing tagline.
Yeah, like Jaws, like Alien Jaws in space. We are eHarmony meets Moneyball for HR. And I want to show you something about culture. I'm actually going to try to share screen here and show you.
Because I think it's one of those things while you're pulling that up that a lot of times we can talk about this and you can go, I think I kind of get it. I like where this is going, but it's one thing to think that, and it's another thing to see it. So I've got it up in screen. So talk to me what we're looking at here.
Yeah. Can you see my cursor where I'm pointing right now?
Yes. Yep.
Okay.
I can.
So up until now, assessments, these self-assessments, you name the brand, okay, are all below. Most of them behaviors, right? From Pymetrics to DISC, predictive index, etc. Now, the most expensive ones, TTI, SHL, Hogan, do get into values, or what we call motivators of our BMW framework, and almost none of them get into work styles and what gives you energy in an environment, right? And guess what? We actually at Humantelligence don't even charge for our assessment. We give it for free because we don't think the value is there for the company. For individuals, there's value in self-awareness, but for the company, why should they pay? They're not getting anything other than the workshop that they pay $10,000 for.
That's just it. The value return for an organization,
zero.
That's great. Now you know more about yourself. This does absolutely nothing for me.
Nothing for the company.
You do anything with it?
Yes,
is a complete shot in the dark.
Yeah, like I talked to people at Deloitte. They're like, "Oh, well, we have an assessment tool. It's called something, and we have when you start, you take it, and it tells you how you fit with everybody." And I'm like, "Okay, in the last 3 years, have you used it?" Well, no, but it was really fun and it was really awesome, and I know my colors and I know other people's colors.
I've got my colors and I've got my 4-letter acronym for what I am. But it's like, what are you doing with that?
What do you do with it?
Most people would say nothing. I have a badge.
Yes, I have a badge. It's on my nameplate in my office, and even though nobody comes to the office, nobody sees it anymore. Maybe it's on our signature. Well, guess what? No value to the company. So what did Humantelligence create? We created this, and this is, the napkin moment of a startup. This was actually on a napkin. This was the genesis when I said, I got to find the best assessment and create a platform. This is the literally structure philosophy of consciousness, which I call emotional intelligence, that around culture of a company. And so it starts with each person being a person with certain behaviors, motivators, and work styles. Then it moves up to the second level where two people, once they are self-aware, they can now, if it's a platform where the tool is at their fingertips, they can now engage better. They can understand each other before they write an email, before they call the person. So in that sense, that is the following.
So it's giving you the insights.
It's giving you the insight. So
while you're talking about that, I think is a really important piece, because going back to what we said with this, okay, so we do these assessment tools and everybody gets excited and they have a really fun time and they have some laughs on like, oh, haha, and this is why I do the thing I do type of thing. But then what do I do with it is almost always lacking, or at least in tangible terms. You might get like a little spreadsheet that says like, hey, when you're doing this, consider this. But remembering that or doing anything actionable with it is almost always challenging.
And so I want to show you how that works in real time, because what we've done with Humantelligence is we've put the insights that you would get at that workshop, okay, from the consultant, we've put it into all emails. So Outlook, Chrome, into Slack. We've put it into your calendar so you can see your team culture meeting. So let me just quickly show you. Is it still sharing?
I took it off while it was loading, and I'll bring it in when you're ready.
Okay, so hold on a second.
So as you're pulling that up, and you just let me know when you actually have it up and live, this is where, and we'll throw some L&D buzzwords into this. You're bringing it into the flow of work in the sense that now, instead of it just being okay, hey, I did this workshop, I have this maybe better self-realization that when I have a conversation, I need to be more aware of this. You're now saying, hey, you're about to send an email. here's some actual considerations that you should send in this email so that you can actually put it to work.
Yes. And okay, I just pulled it up. So
Okay.
share screen.
You're sharing.
Oh,
You're sharing.
oh, I am sharing. Okay. So here's my email. Do you see up here where my cursor is? HT
Yep.
talent profile. Okay.
Yeah.
Someone, an admin anywhere at your company. I mean, Coca-Cola did this. Their admin literally went in. They gave a link to all their employees. So 8,000 people at Coca-Cola Southwest Beverages. They got a link saying, "Hey, I'm the CHRO. We want you to take this tool. It's a really fun tool. You'll be able to communicate better. And it's a communication called EQ Everywhere by Humantelligence." The admin then clicks this, and then the next day on Tuesday, 8,000 people have taken the assessment, and now everybody turns on Outlook, and they have these two little buttons. We have the same for Gmail, we have the same for Slack, and so now when you open an email, you write someone's name, okay, and when you click on talent profile in your email,
it's actually feeding you information.
It feeds you the tips. You can do a side-by-side comparison to show how similar or different you are, or you want to go straight to the tips. It'll tell you, hey, this person, Carrie, he is a maverick. He follows a deep personal sense direction and challenges existing methods. He suggests, so this guy's going to push back on something I say. If I don't know him, it's good to know that before I write to them. He's a creative, so I shouldn't be scared to throw some creative ideas in the email. He'll like that. He's an architect. He's a listener, calm. So maybe that's not so applicable for the email. Then tips on how to communicate with him. He likes, I'll send him a text message that I sent him the proposal. He likes for people to do that. He wants Slack. So I'll also maybe send him a little note on Slack that he won't find that annoying.
It's actually giving you some actionable things that you can say now based on what, and it's not just a one-way thing, because I think that's sometimes the other limiting factor that ends up creating some tension is you're like, okay, I know kind of how I am, but I don't know if that other person has ever done any of this, and if they're aware of it, and I don't really know what to do with it. So I'm going to take a shot in the dark and guess, and I might be wrong, and it may have the opposite effect than what I was intending.
Correct. And then even things such as how to motivate somebody, right? So imagine for onboarding or a new team, a project team you're working on at a consulting firm, okay, and you're now leading people every 3 months, new teams, people's learning styles for L&D. Wouldn't it be great to know how the person learns before you start sending them information or coaching them? So that's all around, EQ, understanding before you write to someone. Back to this table, it comes to this slide here, that EQ everywhere. Everyone wants step 2 to happen: connect, communicate, collaborate. And that's really hard with remote and hybrid work. But now with a culture software like ours, which we're calling CAS, Culture as a Service, because it's on demand for everybody all the time. Okay. So it's a subscription model, not just a one and done like assessments. And there are a one and done pricing model because there is no value after the day you take it in most companies. But now we can help you understand each other to get a better step 2 to then lead to resonance. And so back to that upside down triangle I showed you, this upside down triangle, that's the first step, 2 people engaging better. Yeah. Then you go to the team level where you can measure team culture. You roll it up for 5 or 10 people so that you can align culture to strategy. You can improve your leadership and collaboration and increase performance. And a great example of that one is, if you go into a meeting now, again, this is how it's API with technology as a platform. Okay. And what analytics does, you can go into a meeting that you have and let's see here. And sorry, I just want to.
You're good.
I'm good. Okay. So you go into a meeting and now you click on the other button.
Add in again.
And you have the add-in for the team
there's 2.
culture.
There's the talent profile, and then there's the culture analytics.
Culture analytics. And then culture of the meeting. So if I'm running this meeting, wouldn't it be great to know the behaviors, the motivators, and work styles of the meeting for better collaboration, especially in remote work and hybrid work where you're not seeing people very much anymore. And so if I have to do an action item very urgently.
So I'm gonna jump on this because I actually was reading a study about this recently, and I was looking at some of the data coming out from Microsoft, because one of the beauties of Microsoft is they have all this data coming in on how people are using their systems, and so they can see it. And one of the trends that we're seeing right now is people are tightening their connection with the people they work with directly, but their connection to people outside that silo is degrading big time. And so
Correct.
some of these insights of, okay, I now have this meeting, but these are not with people that I meet with every single week because it's not my team. This is now a team of a cross-functional team.
Correct.
That relationship has gone down big time. And so this point of you're pulling these people together, there's a much better chance, especially after these last 18 months, that you know nothing or very little about this cross-functional team and how to actually get things done, or what are you actually dealing with the dynamic and culture of this meeting organization. And, and add to it, you're meeting on virtual, so there's just a whole
no
other layer of
context.
complexity to it.
It's pure guesswork. For example, this whole idea of inclusivity does not mean just race and religion. What about if you have reflective or cautious people in a meeting that you've never met before? Being inclusive is asking a question and feedback, and then holding space for that reflective and cautious people like Victor and Charles, or they're going to leave the meeting pissed off that they never got a chance.
Jumping in and going, I have a response to this right now, because they need to process and think, you know what, I have some really good insights, but I'm not there yet, and I can't weigh in on this quite yet because I need to think about it, because from a perspective standpoint, they just have a completely different personality.
Yes. And then things like who you assign assignments to that are urgent, maybe give it to your decisive people, not your deliberate. Maybe if you're knowledge based, right, giving somebody a competitive analysis, give it to this person, Russ. Some leaders who could take over the meeting if you have to leave, or like on a workflow between meetings, give it to your influencers.
Or knowing who the influencers are in your group. So if you have a meeting and you're trying to say, I need to get this across the line, who are the people I can get in front of ahead of time? So coming into that meeting, they're bought in, so that I can start actually just driving this forward.
And so work energizers, this is where, your work. Imagine if you're leading a meeting and it's 12 creative people, extremely creative, and you're the only structured person. Wouldn't you lead the meeting slightly differently than you typically would? So these are
maybe just a little bit. If you come in with like a detailed agenda and the entire rest of the meeting is like, we don't operate that way, you've lost the meeting.
Yes. And which, by the way, we've all been in those meetings where people are looking at like each other like, oh my God, this person's style is not what us, right? And so these are all examples how rolling psychometric data up real time in your daily and weekly interactions through any platform. I mean, you can get that through Microsoft Teams, through Aviva and Microsoft. You can do it through Slack now, click on the name, all the way up to the group where you can see all of finance, all the way up to the company where you literally have a CEO dashboard of culture. And so we even get to the point of a CEO dashboard, which I can show you here quickly. You have a team culture where you can see, let's say, here's like, finance team culture, customer success. Well, here is a team culture shot where the leader sees everybody's psychometrics and how they manage each person better. They can do a side-by-side with employees to see that they're like, let's say 59% similar. You can download all these results. You can get the top similarities, top differences, what that means. You can get little tips around the different areas where you're very different, where this person, myself, Juan here on the right, I'm very deliberate. This person decisive.
Even for talent management, talent mobility, the ability to see, hey, like what is, I'm just even thinking the implications on succession planning, leadership development, figuring out, hey, we've got this because we've all seen this, where the team has a subculture. You put a leader in there that does not jive with that subculture, and then the whole team falls apart. People who are
organ rejection.
Like teams that were thriving and killing it and just rocking and rolling. Somebody goes in who might have been a great leader in a different part of the organization, goes into that, and suddenly, boom, the whole team just falls apart and the wheels come off, and people are going, well, I don't get it. This was such a great leader over here. They were running a thriving team.
And
now
what's
we put them
now?
over here and it's toxic. What on earth happened?
So you've nailed it. Applying psychometrics at the team level is really where psychometrics works best, but most psychometric companies don't have a software platform. They're not aggregating through data analytics. So here you can see that this team, in terms of their behaviors, they're 64% change-oriented versus 36% stability. They have no cautious people. So if you want diversity of thought, maybe the next person you hire for this team, whatever the role be, go to cautious. You can also see the information as a diversity chart, see where people are, like who's my most decisive person, Gabby, who's my most free-form thinker, it's this guy, Scott, You can see the motivators of a team. You can also see it as a bar chart. Okay. You get these tips on strengths. You get the tips on weaknesses. Just like an individual has strengths, weaknesses, blind spots, so does a team. And you get those quickly in these kind of like strength, weakness, blind spot, like summaries you can download. And then you can do a target culture where you can see where you want to go and where you currently are and the gaps between that target culture and today. And so some really, really neat stuff, all the way up to the CEO level, where you can see for an entire company, you can see for 200 or 300 people, you can see Culturescape, which is a CEO dashboard of the culture of his or her company, where there's understood 12 cultures that exist globally. This company, for instance, is a consultant, explains that there's stability, people with creative throughout the organization. Number 2 is change agent, and you get the idea. And so a lot of neat things. I'll stop sharing here. A lot of neat things that you can do with psychometrics that have never been done before, and we're leading the charge there.
So what's good grief? We should have booked this for a couple hours, because this is
our clients say the same thing. They start thinking we're an assessment company, and the more they dig, they're like, oh my God, this is so transformational.
When you really think about it, because that is what many organizations have experienced, right? That has been the experience. And so I don't necessarily fault anyone for having that initial reaction, because that's what we've become accustomed to. We've become accustomed to the fact that, okay, you know, assessments of any kind, they're nice, they're fun to have, they're kind of a party trick. You know, some people might get some meaningful
but they don't relate it to performance. They don't relate it to performance.
It's not related to performance.
Yes. Every company using our tool, they increase performance of teams, collaboration of teams, and they reduce. I didn't show you the talent fit. You can now use psychometrics to hire for what works already against existing people. And so we always reduce turnover by between 20 and 30% at all of our clients. Because when you actually hire with data and not through bias subjectivity of just hiring who you like, you can actually hire someone that you might not like, but who's going to succeed in the role.
Okay. Well, and so that's what I was going to ask from an implication standpoint, because like I said, my head's spinning in a lot of different directions for this, but even on, so let's jump to the assessment piece pre-hire. So is this something that organizations are also now starting to incorporate into their recruiting process to say, let's identify whether this person's going to be a success? Because the point you hit on, and I think this, while some in L&D might be like, what does this have to do with learning and development? To me, I would say, but this is the beginning of the journey. If you do this right, you can start people's development journey before they even begin. And like, what better way as an organization to sustain and drive performance is to say, well, one, if we can know where people really need to develop, we can do it right. But 2, why wait until there's a problem to get started? So I'm asking, is this then now becoming incorporated into the recruiting side as well?
Yeah, there's a lot of companies using psychometrics for hiring, both our clients, and then we have competing companies that provide that product. So what our clients do is they do it for 3 things. One, if they want to just clone high performers, so half the roles in your company you might want to clone. So picture McDonald's, they have the people working flipping fries or burgers, right? Not a lot of skills there. It's really a fit with the culture of McDonald's and how they do things. That's a culture fit, right? So they then would give the test to all their high performers in a region, and all their low performers, see the profile of high performance, set it and forget it. So now anybody who applies, they don't do the interview on the store floor. They just have people take a 12-minute test and they hire the greens who fit with high performers. Now, other roles, you want to guarantee diversity of thought. You don't want to clone. You don't want similarity. So any cross-functional team, white-collar worker role, consulting firms, doctors' offices, you want people to add diversity of thoughts. You don't want to just clone, but so you can use our tool as well for that, where anybody who takes a test as an applicant, the system will highlight the greens, the people you should interview as those that are most different from the current team. So best fit is no longer going to be defined as who we like. Best fit is either cloning, meaning someone we like, or guaranteeing someone who's very different from me and I might clash with them, but that's a better solution for that role. So that's the 2 ways companies are using it as well. Second way, I'm sorry, a third way is for developing someone. Everyone, you want them to fit a culture of intention. So if a company's trying to change directionally what the culture of the company is, which should happen every 3 or 4 years, you need to understand who you're hiring is going to fit with that intentional culture and not wait till it's a problem to try to change them. So you can now filter for people who fit with that culture. Case in point, Ashley Furniture, 20,000 employees, 100% turnover, costing them tens of millions of dollars a year. That's the largest furniture company in North America. They used every assessment tool out there for 20 years, but the problem was most assessment tools they gave were only on behaviors, not on BMW. They used our tool and they got to see what an insight was on what performance was, because there was about two factors on behaviors, 2 on motivators, and 2 on work styles. And they put our tool in and reduced turnover by 30% within 3 months and kept it down 30% the whole year, saving tens of millions of dollars. So there's great examples. There's one of a company, a restaurant in Minneapolis. I can't remember the name of it. About 100 people there, horrible net promoter scores, horrible Yelp scores, like 2 out of 5 for service. Nobody would go to that restaurant. They turnover all the time, and we reduced turnover by 90%. The guy, the manager of the store, of the restaurant, gave it to top performers, low performers, and only hired with it after that. Got it to where there was only 10% turnover ongoing, and it has become the #1 restaurant in that town of Minneapolis. Everyone raves about the service. Their Yelp scores are now 5. Psychometrics leading to better performance, better service, aligned to a culture.
But the tie-in is the connection between that, because I think that's one of the things that's an important message for any organization that's even considering treading into this water is this can radically transform things. It can also do absolutely nothing if it's something that you just kind of go, yeah, okay, we did a thing and it sits on a shelf and we don't really look or action against it.
The old assessment model. That what you just described is the old assessment model.
Right. We do a thing. We got some information. We kind of go, isn't that interesting? And then we just kind of set it aside and we don't do anything with it, so this is my follow-up question to that. Well, actually, I have a couple. So we'll see how many of these we can get through. Is what do you think has been one of the biggest limiting factors for organizations to actually be able to action or connect this to performance? What have you seen with organizations that maybe have tried this and said, we've really tried, it just hasn't really worked?
I think we try to convince them that we come at it with analytics, right? Not just an assessment, and we come at it with a platform that gives them value every day. Okay. And at first they're like, well, how's that possible? They can't visualize it. But like I just showed a couple screenshots, you only got to see 10% of the platform just now. There's so much there, right? But once they see it, any HR leader, any CEO sees what I showed you today, and it's very convincing, right? You see that, I can see how to communicate better in an email, how to understand a team meeting better. I'm a leader. I get to see the culture of the team. And I didn't show you the recruiting piece, but it can sort all applicants by who's going to add the most cultural diversity to my team. Okay. Oh my God. What leader, what business, what company doesn't believe that data applied to an area of their company isn't going to help? And so now data can be applied to culture. And that is what's so powerful, because I don't have to educate our clients and leaders that data applied to culture, hiring, and leadership is only going to lead to a better result and a less biased.
And I think the point that you bring to this, and I think this is the part that's important because when we say data, I think it's worth clarifying, because a lot of would say, well, we're generating data, but it's like quality data. And I think that's one of the things that's really important, because I've seen over the years lots of these things that, they come up and there's not a confidence from people that it's really accurate or it's something that they can do anything with. So instead it becomes like it's a good piece of information.
Well, you're talking about, to bring that to life, engagement surveys. People are realizing that engagement surveys and all the money they've invested are actually false data, meaning it's not your culture. Microsoft and Apple are very different culturally. Their products, how to use them, the people making them, the employees, right? Well, they both do.
And if people go from one to the other, I've seen them burn out. They just
burn out, right?
I was great at Apple. I'm going to go to Microsoft.
And they burn out because culture is so different. But when they do an engagement survey, they use the same company for their engagement surveys. They both get 75% super engaged. We're really happy with this company. I love it. I recommend a friend. They both get about 20% who are saying, oh, it's a job, and 5% who hate working there, right? Well, they have the same engagement survey results, yet they have nothing to do with each other. People make the two mistakes with culture, that an engagement survey is going to tell you if you have the right people in the right jobs to achieve your strategy and goals. Not at all. And two, that culture comes from the top, that if you have a great leader, it's just going to, like, through osmosis, trickle down to everybody. Well, we learned at Uber, where they had a real jerk CEO who got fired, 26,000 employees around the world. They've now had a new CEO for a year. Not one person has noticed a change in the culture, because the only people who felt that bad person's culture was the direct team. So a leader and their team will feel leadership culture, but not throughout the whole organization. I worked at Procter & Gamble, and they told us very early, we could fire the top 10% of every person in this company, okay? But because we've made everyone think about becoming dispensable as humans, okay, the culture will remain, because it's not driven by any one person. It's culture is bottom up, okay? And the t-shirts and the coffee mugs and the websites where it's an aspirational culture, that doesn't work, okay? Don Sol, a professor from Harvard Business School and MIT, came out with a seminal study in July of last year, basically proving that 99% of companies that have their culture on their website and their values actually don't live it and don't do it, and employees don't believe in it. Those data points actually are fake. This is using psychometrics will give you a real kind of body scan of your people and of your culture and tell you where there's disease or not.
Well, and it accepts the reality that you don't want one universal culture.
Right.
You don't want it. You know, I think that's one of the things where a lot of organizations say, we want to create our culture as if it's a universal thing. You don't want an organization where everybody there is walking around, acting, thinking, and behaving
correct
exactly the same. That's a terrible organization that's going to just go up in flames in no
correct
time, type of a thing, versus embracing it. And I just, again, kind of continue thinking back to, you know, as we think about, there's the recruiting piece, but another big thing in HR right now is talent mobility. And we think about, hey, you know what, how many times do we performance manage someone out of an organization,
right,
where really that's costing us
huge amounts of money.
Billions,
By the way, that's
of
within existing clients. We land and expand. The hottest product we have, once they understand our platform that we're selling, is career mobility. There's a module where they can literally say, what's the library of all roles? What's the profile, a culture profile of every role and who performs? And so now you can take someone who's not performing and say, where would they fit better? And then just literally push a button, and it'll suggest the 2 or 3 roles where they'd be better. And then they can start having conversations with HR on how to get there. And then
better
interview
based on data.
Based on data.
Because again, and I think this is the point that we just keep hitting home, is it's not just about the job. And I think this is one of the things that can be a little bit incomplete with some of the work that's being done in talent mobility today. Is you might say, oh, your skills would make you really good for this job, but you may still hate it because the culture and the work, the way that team runs, you may go.
We had a woman in our company. She came, joined us for a month doing sales, and then quit and called me. I want to quit. I'm like, why? You know, you're great at sales. She goes, yeah, I have the skills for it, but I hate it. I'm realizing and then we pulled up her assessment, and this is actually the genesis of this module for career mobility. And we said, well, let's look at what works in other companies for customer success, for finance, for accounting. And it turns out that her psychology, her psychometrics aligned her much more for being a customer support person. And so now she leads all of our customer success. Her name is Beth Hales, and she's remarkable, and she's so happy. And we went from a woman quitting to a woman who not only is happy, but she's delivering running the group. And her career, she's the happiest she's ever been, she said. And she went from quitting to happiest in her career because of a psychometric test and using it for career mobility internally.
And I think that's one of the things that, you know, this goes way back to the very beginning of the conversation, which is so many people are doing things and they may not necessarily even understand why. And I think I just think of her as an example where it's like, well, I'm in sales and I can do it.
Right.
But is it because is it because that's really what you thrive and are great at? Or is it just what you've been doing. And I think there's a lot of people in organizations who they're doing what they've been doing because that's what they've done. And they may not necessarily know where they'll succeed elsewhere.
And the big transformational shift is that UKG, SuccessFactors, Workday, they but now the future is, what is the company doing for me? What's in it for me? And that belief system of what's in it for me, psychometrics are key, because you want to bring to work and align your passions, your aspirations, who you are, what makes you happy. All of that now is equally important to a company, and to keep good talent, it's being flipped on its head. And so our platform and psychometrics is helping companies put the person in front of the company. And together, that's going to lead to a more successful long-term human capital strategy and employee experience.
So, like I said, we could keep going on this forever, but I think that was really the apex that I think is a great place to end on, because this is a shift that we're seeing, and organizations are having to make this shift from thinking about, well, what's in it for us out of the employees? But we can't flip completely the other way and go, well, it's just whatever the employee wants, because you can't run a business that way.
Right.
You cannot run the business that way by saying, well, whatever people want, we're just going to give it to them. Like,
correct.
That's not going to make it either. And I think what we're talking about is how this is bringing them together to say, you know what? It doesn't have to be either or. It can be both. And this is actually creating an opportunity to do what's best for the business from a performance standpoint, while at the same time doing what's best for each individual and giving them an opportunity in an environment where they can thrive and just crush it while bringing that performance to the organization. So this has been, I'm energized, Juan. I don't know about you. I'm energized based on this conversation. So I'm so glad that despite all the rescheduling and bouncing around, we had to make it work, that we were able to get it on the books. Thanks everybody who's been watching. Hopefully this has changed the way you think about not just even assessment tools, but the way you're thinking about talent and mobility and development and recruiting. I mean, this has a lot of implications on a lot of different things. So I appreciate you making the time, Juan. Thanks everybody for watching, and have a wonderful, wonderful weekend if I broadcast this on a Friday.
Thanks, Chris, and good luck with the birth of your sixth child, and God bless you and all the viewers who took time out of their schedule to listen to us talk about this very important topic.
All right. Thanks, everybody.